Okay, I'm going to talk to you about a question about Arlah. Okay, as you're going to see, Arlah is not such a shaila that's usually going to get to people. We don't usually think about shailas about Arlah. So this came up an unusual situation. I'll explain to you in a second. So you'll hear lots of different things having to do with halachas of Arlah. You'll tell me what you think. And as I usually say, I really don't want to just talk and talk and talk. How many pages I have to say? So you should feel free to interrupt me and stick in your 2 cents. Keep me from talking forever. So what happened was we were asked to give hashkacha for someone who's making wine, and this was at a little bit of an unusual winery in that it's a pretty small place, and they grow their own grapes, and they're growing them right there, right alongside where they produce the wine. And the day we came there, they were planting trees, they were planting vines. That day we came there. He says lots of people come. There's like a lot of, it's like a touristy kind of a place. He says he thinks we're the first people who ever walked into a place and saw them planting. Okay? And they were planting stuff. So we started thinking about, well, if they're planting it right now, so then is there an Arlah shiloh? Okay, they're going to grow, the grapes are going to grow, and is there a shiloh of Arlah here? Okay? So let me tell you a little bit about how the grapes grow first, and then we'll hear what the part of the shiloh is like this. Grapes, like most other things, the farmers don't plant seeds in the ground, but they buy their plants from a nursery. So the nursery grows, think like a nursery for a baby. They grow the plants till they're very small, and then they pass them on to the farmer who's going to plant them in the ground. So there's two ways to replant a grapevine. One is called bare root. Okay, bare root means is literally there's nothing. It's just wood. Okay, they take all the dirt off, and that bare root plant goes to the farmer. That for sure, the years of Arlah start again. Okay, because there's no dirt on this thing, and you have to start Arlah years. Start the 3 years of Arlah start counted again. And then other ones do. They call it potted. Okay, potted literally means it comes in a little pot, in a little flower pot. Which is to say, they grew it in the nursery in a little flower pot, and then they pass it on to the farmer who transplants it into the ground. Okay, so the bare root people for sure need to count the 3 years of Arlah starting again. Okay, whether the people who use a pot do or don't, we're going to talk about that. Okay, we're going to come to that, whether they have to restart the years or not. Okay, so what happens is after they come to the farm, to the vineyard, the first year they go into the ground, nothing grows. It just grows a lot. They let it grow wild. It just grows and grows and grows, and no grapes come out of the tree. In the second year that it's there, there's a little bit of grapes grow, but nothing that they could use commercially. The third year, they get half a crop. Okay, they get half of what you usually get, but it seems that they're very fine grapes that grow in that year. They get a half of a crop, and they sell those. They're very good grapes. They make really good wine that third year. And then come the fourth year, they're making a regular full amount, and then it goes on and produces for the next 30 years. Okay, the vine will then grow for the next 30 years. Okay, so where we were standing, it was in 2024. They had planted those ones that planted in 2024 will have nothing in 2025. Okay, in 2026 they're going to have a half a crop, and in 2027 they're going to have a full crop. Okay, if you look at a grapevine, you wouldn't be able to tell how old it is. Me and you couldn't tell how old it is. The farmer could tell right away. He looked at it. He says, "Oh, this is 8 years old, and this is 12 years old." Just by looking at it, he could tell how old the vine was. It has to do with how they trim it, but you could probably tell if it's a brand new vine. That you probably, by looking at it, could see that much. Is it a year old or 20 years old? You could tell the difference. Okay, so that's just some basics of how the tree grows. Okay, one more thing. They usually plant vines. We'll see how this is relevant. They usually plant vines in the winter. Okay, well, we were there in the spring. It had to do with the rainfall of Vachena. They planted in the spring. Okay, so what's some dinim of Arlah? The first 3 years that fruits grow on a tree, the trees are usher. Now they eat the fruits are usher. Now they eat them, and they're usher bahana also. That's usher midaraisa, and it's usher midaraisa even in the chutz. It's not considered mitzvah tlib art. It's usher even in the chutz. That 3 years that you count, the 3 years that you count of Arlah is not counted day to day. It doesn't go 3 years. It's not 36 months. Okay, the way you count it is it depends when you planted the tree. If you plant the tree between Rosh Hashanah and Tu B'Av, okay, so like right now, if you planted the tree today, Then the first year ends on Rosh Hashanah. This coming year, it'll end. It's in a few months. Okay, or whenever it is. When we were there, let's say it was, I don't know if it was out, I don't know when it was, ends on Rosh Hashanah. The second year ends the next Rosh Hashanah. And the third year ends a little more than a year later on Tu B'Shvat. Okay, so if you planted the tree today, it would end on Tu B'Shvat in 2027. It's on January 23rd, 2027. Okay, so it's in like 2.5 years from now. Okay, it's like 2.5 years. It's not 3 years at all. If you would have planted it on when they would more typically plant it in the middle of the winter, it would be about 3 years. But it's not 36 months. Okay, now there's a different.
Does it go to the third Rosh Hashanah?
Say it again. Third one does not go to Rosh Hashanah. If you planted it between Rosh Hashanah and Tu B'Av, then it goes till Tu B'Shvat. If you plant it after Tu B'Shvat, Tu B'Av, I'm sorry, if you plant it after Tu B'Av, like if you plant it Rosh Chodesh El, 2 months from now, you plant it on Rosh Chodesh El, then the first year ends a little more than a year later on Rosh Hashanah, and then another year Rosh Hashanah, and then a third year Rosh Hashanah. So then, if you plant between Tu B'Av and Rosh Hashanah, then it ends 3 years and a couple of weeks on the Rosh Hashanah. But for most things, it ends on Tu B'Shvat. In this case, it's less than 36 months later. It's counted as 3 years. Okay, so what that means is, okay, I hope I didn't confuse you with that. The cheshbon. Okay, for all the grapes get planted except if you're in the southern hemisphere. Okay, if you're in Chile, then they're going to plant it in the wrong time. They might plant it before Rosh Hashanah. Okay, because their seasons are opposite of ours. But the way we plant it in the winter, so it's going to be usher until Tu B'Shvat of 2027. Okay, which means is that this tree, I told you, these trees that they're planting right now are going to be making fruits in 2026. Okay, they're going to have grapes in 2026, but they're not going to be usher, they're not going to be mutter until 2027. Okay. Okay, so you got that. That's the question. That's our problem. In 2026, these grapes are going to be growing, and there's going to be therefore a shayla of Arlah on those grapes.
When they planted these were bare root?
They were not. In this place, they were not. They were potted. Okay, we're going to talk about the potted part of that shayla in a second. But for now, look at it just from when they planted it. Okay, they planted in 2026. They planted in 2024. In 2026, they're going to have fruit. But
26 can be the half crop, right?
A half crop, yeah. But they're going to sell that. It's a half crop that's worth to them. That's actually, they said it's a very special crop. They like that crop. Whatever they're trying to explain to us why.
It's separate or it's mixed?
No, they're just going to sell it. When you buy wine, you buy based on the vintage of the wine. Right. So the 2026 of this type is going to all of a sudden be very good. It's going to taste better than the 2027.
By itself.
Maybe yes, maybe not. I guess that depends on their decision what they want to do with it. Whether they're not going to tell the consumers that 2026 was from a half a crop. That whole part's not going to. But it might just come out that the 2026 is this great crop. You don't know why, but the truth is it's because it was made from that half crop.
And nothing's being mixed.
I was thinking it's kavuas or whatever. There's
nothing being mixed.
It's possibly kavul. What?
There's nothing being mixed. There's no bit on
it. Might be mixed. I don't know. That depends on.
Two crops. They poured wine.
They might. No, not that they mix two parts of the field. Yeah. They might be growing Moscato grapes over here and Moscato grapes over here, and they make these are old and these are new, and they might mix them together. That's their recipe, how they decide to mix it or not. But they're not going to mix from 1 year from the next year. That they wouldn't. I don't think they would mix that. Yeah.
You could use Safek or it's not a Safek.
We're coming to Safek. That's what we're coming to talk about Safek first. That's our first question is about Safek. Okay.
3 years that you count as whether or not there's fruits on it or not. Right?
Correct. I mean, and the Ramban says that the reason why Arlah is usher is because usually you don't have fruits till the 4th, 5th year. So the Baruch wanted the first fruit should go to be brought to show give to Hashem. So in the first couple of years, even if it has fruits, it's pretty shvach. The 4th year it has, you bring them as Neta, revai. You bring it in Yerushalayim. That's a give to the Baruch. And then the 5th year you're on. So usually it does not have fruits in the first couple of years. And here's an example: the trees don't have until the 3rd year shvach, almost half a crop, and then the 4th year it's a regular. Okay, so I told you already that Arlah is usher even chutz. Okay, but as you know, there's a big difference between Arlah and chutz from Eretz Yisrael. They're both usher midaraisa, but Arlah and chutz is only usher from halacha mishum Sinai, and the Gemara says part of the halacha mishum Sinai is that Safek Arlah is mutter. Okay, so just sort of like an aside to that is the Ran says that rule that Safek Arlah is mutter. Safek Arlah and chutz is mutter is part of the regular rule that kol hamekal ba'aretz halacha k'moiseh b'chutz. Because he says if there's a machlokes about something, this is machlokes about it. That means that it's at least a Safek that the one who's makel is correct. If it's a machlokes, that means there's two legitimate opinions. The Gemara says not beishamai, but two legitimate opinions that one thing's mutter, one thing's usher. So if I think it's mutter and you think it's usher, so at least I'm a legitimate opinion. So now Safek Arlah. So it's mutter because at least the Safek that I might be right. Okay, that's how the Ran learned that those two rules, Safek Arlah and chutz and kol mekel ba'aretz halacha k'motzei b'chutz, those are connected to each other. Okay, that's what the Ran learns. The Chazon Ish says the Taisus this doesn't hold like that. No, the Chazon Ish says it's really. To me, it was surprising chiddush. He says is the rule is kol hamekel ba'aretz halacha k'motzei b'chutz. He says, and there's a similar rule by Evel. Kol hamekel be'evel, kol hamekel be'evel halacha k'motzei, and kol hamekel in erivin halacha k'motzei. He says those are not because it's a kula in the din. It's because Chazal poked around at every single machlokes and decided that it happens to be that the mekel is right in all those machlokes. Okay, just like a coincidence. They looked at all the shilas in Hilchas Erevin, and they saw all the machlokes that there were, and all of those it was lekula, and all in Hilchas Avelis also. It turned out that all the people who were makel were actually right. So halacha can never makel be'evel. Okay, I'm not sure how he understands it for Arlah, because he's saying it's only in chutzar. So what happened? Either they're right or they're wrong. I'm not sure how that, but he says it for Arlah also. He says by Arlah it happens to call hamekel. It happens to be all the people who are makel happen to be that they're correct. So which means is it's only true for shilas that are in the Gemara. Okay, it doesn't help us if we have machlokes nachronim. It's not going to help us because Chazal didn't say that. Okay, but I don't think that most people hold like this Chazon. Chazon just says it's a sheet of Taisus, and Chazon himself says in a bunch of places to be makel, call makel aretz for things that are not from the Gemara. So I don't know if he holds like that. Then it's just something in understanding. Okay, so the because Safek Arlah is mutter, because Safek Arlah in chutz is mutter, most people living in chutz never think about Arlah. Okay, so if you have a tree in your backyard, you think about the halachas of Arlah. If you buy fruit from Eretz Yisrael, you think about Arlah. But otherwise, we never think about it because who cares that there are some apples that are Arlah? It doesn't make difference to me as long as there are some apples that are mutter, even if it's a tiny amount of them that are mutter. Safek Arlah is mutter. I don't have to think about it. Okay, so in chutz almost no one thinks about it. There was a tumult recently about pomegranates coming from Eretz Yisrael. Okay. And part of the question was whether there's an Arlah Shiloh. Okay, so when it comes from Eretz Yisrael, you think about maybe it's Arlah. But when it comes from for regular, you go to the fruit store, you don't think about what this Arlah on it. Why do you think about it? Arlah is Aser. Who cares? But it's Safek, it's always mutter. Okay, so that's for most of us, we never think about it. Okay, so but the other time, there's another examples of Safek Arlah is if you're not sure if something is a fruit or a vegetable. Okay, there's machlokes about things. There's Gemara talks about machlokes about whether a certain thing is it a fruit that has arlah or it's a vegetable that doesn't have arlah. So we go lukula in chutz. Or what happens if at the end of the siman is about what happens if it's a machlokes if this is considered to be replanting ma'avrich and markiv, or is it considered replanting? So we say also we go lukula in chutz. Okay, but then there's the most famous, a very famous din about Safek Arlah, which you probably know that the Gemara says. Sapekli or svokli bani echol. Okay, the Gemara says you could say to somebody, I don't know if that stuff is arlah. You know, don't tell me. Go get me the fruit and you feed it to me. For me, it'll be a Safek. You know what it is, but I'm allowed to eat it. Okay, that's how far it goes that Safek arlah should be mutter. Okay? What does that mean? That means is since for me it's a Safek, I'm allowed to eat it. So you want to give it to me, no problem, because you're not giving me something that's aser. You give me something that's mutter. I'm allowed to eat it. Because I don't know if it's Arlah. So you go pick it and you give it to me. You don't know. You know it's Arlah. I don't know if it's Arlah. Okay. So when you read the Gemara, you say no problem. I can even give it to you if I know it's Arlah. Okay. So for sure, me the hashkacha doesn't have to care about it. I give you the stuff that's Arlah. Even if I knew that the wine was made from Arlah, I don't care because I'm allowed to give it to you as long as you don't know. I'm allowed to give it to you. Okay. Sounds a little strange, doesn't it? Okay. Well, that's what the Gemara says. There's only one little problem. And the problem is that the Beis Yosef says, he says, yeah, I know the Gemara says that. He says, how come the Rambam doesn't bring it? How come the Rif doesn't bring this Gemara? What happens? Why doesn't anybody bring this Gemara? So Beis Yosef says, because they don't think it's the halacha. Okay, that Gemara is only going to Maman Yamar. However, they explain why the Gemara is not halacha. He says, I don't think it's correct. It comes up also in Hilchos Lulav. the Gemara says that you're not allowed to use an esrog shel Arlah. Okay, esrog is a fruit. Now use esrog shel Arlah. That's what the Gemara says. Pretty straightforward. So the Magen Avraham says, how come that din is not brought in the Rambam? I don't remember. I'm sorry. I take that back. I don't remember if it's brought in the Rambam. How come it's not brought in Shulchan Aruch that you're not allowed to use an esrog of Arlah? So he says, I know. You know the answer. Because Safek and chutz is mutter. So the Gemara is talking about Eretz Yisrael. We have, or if we know that it's Arlah, for us it's always a Safek, so it's always going to be mutter. That's what Magen Avraham says. He says, but there's a problem because Beis Yosef says that Gemara is not halacha. If you know it's Arlah, so the Shulchan Aruch told you, if you know it's Arlah, you're not allowed to use it. So he gives them a funny answer afterwards. But okay, anyhow, so this din that Safek Arlah is you're allowed to give it to someone that if you know it's Arlah is not true. You're not allowed to do that. If I know it's Arlah, I'm not allowed to give it to you. Okay, so now comes the Shiloh to me. Now here's where we have our Shiloh. My mashgiach is standing there at the wine factory making wine. Most times people who make wine have no idea where the grapes are coming from. Okay? The grapes come from someplace else. They get delivered by a truck. Okay? But in this case, the wine it's 50 feet away is the vineyard. Okay? He might know straight out that it's coming from the new stuff. Or even if he doesn't know straight out, he can just ask somebody. All he has to do is ask the guy, is this from, when are these grapes from? And in a second, he'll know whether they're from the Arlah ones or not from the Arlah ones. If he's sitting there in 2026, he'll know in 1 second, are these the ones that were planted in 2024? They won't, or they're not. So, is he mechuyev to do that? Okay?
That's the case in the Mechaber, when you're right outside the field, no? The case for Safek Arlah and chutz is when you're right outside the field and still a Michael.
You Michael because you don't know. You don't know. The question is,
go into the field and find out, no?
So,
you can't go to the field.
So that's the question. Am I mechuyev? If I knew I can't give it to you, the question, am I mechuyev to turn around and look and see and find out if it is or not? And so one question will be for a regular person. That's for a regular person. And then related to that, maybe you don't think of the question like this: is that do hashkachas have maybe a bigger responsibility? Maybe you consumer would be allowed to do that. But maybe if I'm putting my name on it and saying this stuff is kosher, am I taking more responsibility to say is I checked out. I looked around the corner. I asked the guy, "Can you tell me which year this stuff was planted in?" Okay, maybe I have a bigger responsibility as a hashkacha. Okay, so I don't know. That's like a deeper question. Do hashkachas have extra responsibilities? But the regular question: are you mechuyev to check? Okay, are you mechuyev to check, or only if you know that the stuff is Arlah?
But the case of the Gemara, you said when the Gemara says this case is mutter, you're asking, do I have to find out what's?
No. So the Gemara says you could actually, if I know it's Arlah, I could give it to you because you don't know it's Arlah. But that's not halacha. We don't pass like that. So if I know it's Arlah, I can't give it to you. Now the question is, I don't know it's Arlah, but it's easy for me to find out whether it's Arlah. Imagine if this is a question of whether it's chazer or not. I wouldn't say I don't know. I'm allowed to eat it. I go check for a second. Okay. So of course you have to check. So over here, do we say Safek Arlah? It's a Safek. Right now it's a Safek. We say, come on, it's a Safek. But in 10 seconds you could find out, and then it's literally it's around the corner from the guy, so he could just find out by himself whether it's Arlah.
Why is it different than any typical Safek when it's Efshel Var? You're mechuyev to do it.
So that's one side. To say it's just Efshel Var. But here the problem is because here Safek is Lahedya is mutter. Even though the regular rules of Roiv and Kol the Parsh it doesn't make difference. Even if all those things say it's also, you're still at even if it's Safek.
Even if it's Roiv.
Even if it's Roiv, yes, even if it's Roiv.
I thought it depends. You hold like the Ram and the Raj, but Sat the Raisa Chomer is their bun on the Raisa.
That's what some people say like that, but that's a question. That's a one kind of a shaila. But in halach l'maisa, no, it's true. Makes a difference. Even if it's 90% that it's treif, that it's Arlah, you're allowed to eat it. As long as any Safek, you're allowed to eat it. So if any Safek means we don't follow the regular rules here, so maybe then I don't have to be involved either.
Even if we're not going with the Gemara, we still
right. The Gemara was talking about a step past that, which was to say I can give it to you. I know it's Arlah, but you don't. So for you, it's mutter. Okay. So
here it's different than every Safek also because the Gemara the Gemara says that you're allowed to. I'm allowed to be misapik. I'm allowed to.
We don't go with that.
We don't go with that. But I have to find out
because
meaning if I know, the Gemara says I'm allowed to, and on that the Beis Yosef says kanireh that we don't paskin. That's sad. But over here, as long as I don't know, then I'm back in the Gemara.
No, the Rashba says it's regular Savat Raisa L'Chomer. That's the Raisa. So Ani Alach Mashina tell me you go to Kul and Chutz L'Aretz. So it's only true by Safek Shakal. Now we hold Shakal Torah in the Ram because Ram holds Savat Raisa is the Kula. So Ani Alach Mashina. So there we have the answers of Ischazik Yisur and Roy. The Chasam Sofer and Shuvah says, well, that's only true in the Rambam, but the rule of the Rashba you have no right to make on a roiv and it's chazik yisura. So it's only true by Safek Shakal. So if I have 80% Arlah, the Rajmi Machmer. If I hold Safek Raisa as L'chomra, neither Raisa, some Sefer says Tshuva is that if you don't have all these clues of roiv and chazik yisura, it's only true by Safek Shakal.
Right, okay.
Regardless, in each bottle, I'll have a suffix if it's oil of or whatever it is.
You have a suffix. You have a suffix, but I'm standing there. They're about to make the wine, but in a minute I can find out what it is. So before they put it into the bottle, I'm not talking about you consume who buys it. So am I mechuyev to do that? I, the mashkiach, mechuyev to do that. And me hashgacha tell him go look. He could look. I'm telling you, it's right there. It's an unusual case. The people who make grape jelly, okay, they have no idea where the grapes are coming from. Okay, so for them it's a plain old suffix. He has no way to be easy way to be mavar. But here it's hard to describe. It's like walking from here to my son's apartment. That's how far it is. You know what I mean? To see the grapes. So look around the corner and you'll ask the guy, when did you plant these from? He'll tell you. They all know exactly because that's their business. Okay.
Is it so clear by regular history you're mechuyev to find out? You can't put yourself in a situation that after the fact you can't find out anymore. So
what do you mean after the fact?
After they put it in the bottles, you're not
then you
going
won't
to find
know,
it.
right? Correct.
So let's say it would be a real issue. I could find out earlier. Decide not to. Let's say it'll be a roiv, so it'll be multi. I have to find out. I can't let a situation happen that now I don't know.
It's absolute
It's not absolute. Absolute is after I have the question. Absolute. Over here, I put myself. Now it's absolute. I put myself in a situation that I could have.
You could link it
Safek
back. No, you
doesn't
can't link it
place
back.
it.
You could, but forget about that. Right now, we're putting in. I'm the mashkiach. I'm making sure the food is kosher.
I'm letting go.
You say it. It's not true because you know there's not.
I'm making sure the food is kosher. I'm going to tell people you could eat this food. I'm the guy standing there.
Right now, you could.
Okay. Even if I wasn't the mashkiach, just I'm the guy who knows whether this is or not. So you think I should just close my eyes and then let him eat because of stuff? Okay, I can't. I would by regulars. I wouldn't think that's even a question. Okay, it's only here where the suffix is mutter. So then there's a lot of room over here. Like I don't have to pay so much attention.
The only possible case is that it's mutter, even when you see the guy being biter, or when you see the guy being biter, it's worse. Isn't that
If you
the
see him
case?
being biter, that's the same as sapegli. That's the same as saying to the person, "I know that it's isser."
That's the case.
That's the same as that case. Okay, so the Chassam Sofer says, he says, "Kivin she'efshel levar tzarich levar l'chayra." Okay, the Chassam Sofer says, "L'chayra." Even by Safek Arlah, if you were efshel levar, you'd be mechuyev levar.
That's not what afterwards. It's not exactly the same case.
I know. I don't think that's a difference. I know you think it's a difference. I don't think that's the difference between before and after. I don't see the difference there. Okay, you could disagree. In Tzitz Eliezer, he also thinks like that. And I'll tell you what he says. And here's also we have to. If you look in Shulchan Aruch, in the Pesach Tshuva brings Shivas Tzion, the son of the Nabi Yehuda, Shivas Tzion, who says that not only is Safek Arlah mutter, he says, but even if it's a Safek Chesaron Chachma, it's also mutter. Usually Safek Chesaron Chachma is not considered a Safek at all, so he says even that is considered mutter. That's what it says in Pesach Tshuva. If you look at the Tshuva, you see that he says it has to do with a Shaila and a Shuvas Rashba. And the Shivas Tzion says, I couldn't find the Shuvas Rashba. But I think that it's mutter, whatever the case was, I think it's mutter because Safek Chesaron Yedi is mutter. Okay? So, in Tzitz it says, well, we know what the tshuva is now. It's in Chelik Gimel, Siman Reish Chav Hey. Okay? And the shaila that the person asked the Rashba was, is a Safek Chesaron Yediyah, do you have to be choshesh for that? He says, L'chayra, that should not, the shaila says, L'chayra, that should not be considered a Safek, even for Safek Arlah, because it's not even a Safek. It's not Safek Arlah, because it's Safek Chesaron Chachma. And the Rashba's answer doesn't disagree with the person. He sounds like he agrees with the person that that's the Safek and whatever the tshuva goes on with whatever it has to say with it. So he says if you see the tshuva, when you read the tshuva, you should get the feeling that Safek Chesaron Chachma is not considered a Safek. Okay, that's not a Safek. So says so the same thing here also. It's a Safek. I could just find out what the thing is. So I'm going to do that. I don't treat that as a Safek and say I consider that to be kosher. Okay, so we work with the assumption. Again, I'm saying to you, even if I was a regular person, but kosher came if I'm a hashgacha, putting my name on and saying this food is kosher, I would be mechuyev to check it out and find out which year did you get it from. Or think of it a different way. We tell the company 100 things that they have to do to make the food kosher. Okay, especially in wine, think about all the steps that they have to do. We could tell them you can't bottle wine from the first 3 years, from that first year when it comes out. You could tell them that. If that's one of the time we'd make them, they'd have to do that, and then we'd follow up. We'd make sure that they did that. Okay, and it's not like it's such a crazy requirement that we should give to them such a thing. We tell them you can't use that first year, so that year won't be kosher. That what do you call it? That year is whatever you call it. Well, vintage won't be kosher.
There is such a mitzvah where they're harvesting that alone.
But they're harvesting it. Okay, they're harvesting those things. If we say to them,
Every batch of grapes, is there ever going to be a situation where it's just those?
potentially, back to your old question, do they sometimes mix these ones with those ones? Maybe yes, maybe not. But they're for sure. Today they're harvesting at this part of the field, right? So whether they mix with other ones, yes or no, I don't know. Depends on that. Okay, so now let's go to the question itself, and that is, I keep talking to you about the fact that they put the plants in 2024, so in 2026 it's going to be Arlah. Okay, but what we haven't talked about is, but in 2025 those plants were planted in the nursery. Okay, so could we count that year? If we count that year, then we're free and clear. We have nothing to worry about. Okay, we have nothing to worry about because our 3 years are going to be over before anything comes out of the ground. Okay, so what's the regular rule? Okay, so you know the regular rule. I'll just mention it. These people usually potted plants. So the din is that midaraisa, if something is in a difference between an Atzis nakuv and an Atzis she'ein nakuv. An Atzis nakuv, okay, a pot that has holes in it. Then the unika, the plant draws nutrition from the ground, and therefore it's considered attached to the ground. Okay, and therefore it's chayiv in all regular din mitzvahs hatchlis ba'aretz. Anything has to do with the ground is considered ground. No, I'm sorry, I take it back. No, forget about mitzvahs hatchlis ba'aretz. If I'm on Shabbos, I take a tomato off that plant. I did a malacha deraisa on Shabbos. I taking the tomato off that plant. What happens if I have Atzis nakuv, Atzis she'ein nakuv? Okay, I have a flower pot that has no holes in it. Okay, and so we say there's no nutrition coming from the ground.
What's it made of?
And it's made of the right materials. We'll talk about materials in a second. Made of the right materials. I'm sorry, the wrong. Let's say it's metal. Okay, so a metal blocks bleeds from coming through. So then I use the word bleeds. I'm sorry. I used to think about Kosher. Okay, no unica from coming through. That's not considered attached to the ground. Midaraisa, if you take a cucumber off that plant, you did not do any issa deraisa on Shabbos. Okay, you did issa derabanan. Midarabanan is considered attached, but not midaraisa. Okay, so Chacham give us all kinds of rules of what's considered attached, and the simplest rule is it depends on if we say it's Atzis nakuv, it has a hole in it. It depends on how big the hole is. Okay, so I couldn't pass up. I'm sorry. On Friday, my wife bought a flower pot, so I brought the pot with me. Okay, so the most simple rule is that if the hole is has to be over a certain size, if the hole is under a certain size, then that's not considered a hole. Okay, the poskim have all kinds of discussions, modern day poskim, about how big that hole has to be. So I brought you pots you could see, and that is if the hole is 2 centimeters. Most people hold a 2 centimeter hole is big enough for your understanding. The holes that are here are about 2/3 of a centimeter. Okay. What? It's a hole to do in the contemporary. Again, I have to say something. Until recently, until Yidden started living in Eretz Yisrael, no one thought about child of Arlah. Okay, because Arlah chutz is his mother. You don't think about it. Okay, in Eretz Yisrael, it's halach l'maisa for them because the Safek is also it's a much big aser. So there's a whole to do in the contemporary place about how big it has to be, and most people say if it's 2 centimeters, then you go. If it's under 2 centimeters, there's 100 opinions whether it's good or not.
Do you add the holes together?
Oh, so you add the holes together. So there's and Chaim Kanevsky has over here. So each one of these is 2/3 of a centimeter. Okay, so that means if we had 3 holes, that would be 2 centimeters. Okay, so Chaim Kanevsky says in a little ha'ara on the bottom, he says l'chayra, the holes don't count if you don't mix. The holes don't join together to count as one. Okay, without rise, he just says l'chayra. It sounds like that. Okay, I don't know. I don't have any opinion. That's what he says. I mean, it sounds like 5 words, like in the little thing on the bottom.
He's the only one that speaks about it?
That I know of. Maybe there are other people who speak about it also. That's the only one I saw who speaks about it. And he just says l'chayra, that the holes joining together would not count.
No matter what they want to do with styrofoam, they have like a mesh.
Like a mesh. Okay, that's a good question. See, because Mom's like got a zillion holes in it, and Mom's almost no. This I mean move al parrots. A parrots move al. That's a good. I don't know. Okay, but you should just know this is a whole asik in Eretz Yisrael because they have to make sure foods don't become arla. I was involved there with a farm there that we were there for one crop, but they told us they have hashkacha on their mangoes. I think it is that they grow. I think it's mango trees that they grow. That they have hashkacha to make sure that the years that it grows in the nursery don't get lost for Arlah. So when it gets to the farmer who's going to plant them, they've already, however much time they gained at the nursery doesn't get lost. Okay, and they have a whole way that they grow it with hashkacha to make sure they don't lose their year, because for the farmer that's important. The farmer wants to sell his food as without blich shash arla, or they want to sell without arla problem. So he wants to catch as many years as he can in the nursery. Okay, okay. So if you okay. So the usually grown in an Atzis she'ein nakuv is a kula. Okay, I told you the case of Shabbos. You take something off the tree on Shabbos. If it's Atzis she'ein nakuv, it's more kal. Okay, over here it's the opposite. Over here, being Atzis nakuv is a chumrah, because if it grew in Atzis she'ein nakuv, that means it's midoraisa. It wasn't growing in the ground. If it was growing in the ground, that means we're not starting our early years until next year. Okay? So like the beer root ones I told you, they used to get planted right in the ground. The beer roots ones at the nursery plants them in the ground. But there, as soon as they take them out of the ground, they knock all the dirt off of them. Boom, we're out of it. We lost our year. Okay, but the ones that grow in potted start the growth in potted plants. So if this is considered an Atzis she'ein nakuv, then then here it's a chumrah, because here we'll say it was not planted in the ground yet. And it only became planted in the ground next year, which would mean that our stuff is Arlah. Okay, so that's looking bad for the Jews over here. Okay, because it's the opposite of what you usually have. Usually, Atzis she'ein nakuv is a kula, and here it's going to potentially be a chumrah.
Here the Mashiach have a Safek yesh l'vura maybe.
Because
It's hard for them to know what it came in, what those trees came in.
so that's true.
It's
So
the same every time, no?
well, it does the same every time, and
It always has to be the same. Maybe that. So you always use different pots. You know what I'm saying?
So you're saying he has
Maybe that's
a
fine.
suffix now that maybe it came in Atzis nakuv. Okay, that's fair. That you can think about that. Maybe I have a suffix that I don't know how it came. Okay, now it happened to be when we were at the farm. It was very interesting to watch them planting. We spent a lot of time watching it just because we were interested in it, and we thought about Arlah when we were looking at it. We forgot to look underneath to see how big the holes were, or if there were holes in them. Okay. Afterwards, looking back, we tried to look back at our pictures to see if we had any pictures that showed us. We didn't have any pictures of the underside of the thing. We could ask them if we wanted to, but I suspect that they're not going to be 2 centimeters big. That's a pretty big hole, relatively. I mean, look at the hole in this thing. The pots that they had were maybe a quarter of the size of this. The whole
Farmers use
what?
farmers use something else.
But they don't pick up their pots in Home Depot. They probably use the same thing, no?
Yeah, they're getting it from a nursery. The nursery.
The nursery probably has the same pot.
Right, no, it could be they have more than one nursery who supplies them. It could be, or they could be, this year they use this kind of pot, and next year they use this kind of pot.
Years ago they had that.
Right, what they use, but they weren't very big pots. I'm thinking they were like maybe a quarter of the size of these pots. So how big is the hole going to be? And the whole thing was like this big. The whole plant was like this big. You know what I mean? So how big is the hole going to be underneath there?
It's not even a Safek. As long as it's a Safek, we have a Safek.
Okay, so maybe that's fair. Okay, I can hear that. Okay, we'll do better than that. Okay, we'll do better than that. Okay.
If you put it in the Atzis she'ein nakuv for a second, it doesn't start over.
I'm going to talk about that in a second. I'm coming to that. Okay, so no, but the nurseries who grow potted start in the pot. Okay,
Over there, they're on the truck.
I'm getting to the trucks. I'm getting to the truck. We'll get to the truck.
They transplanted with the dirt.
In the potted ones, they come with the dirt.
And they transplanted with the dirt.
With the dirt in the pot, the same pot that it grew in gets delivered to the vine, to the
And
vineyard.
then the vineyard themselves, when they transplanted.
They take the whole thing out and stick it into the ground. They dig a hole and they just stick it with the dirt. And that's the whole point of potted, is that you want it to keep on growing, as opposed to the bare root ones. You're starting with a very shvacha plant because it has no dirt in it. For whatever reason why they do it, I don't know. Whatever their cheshbon is, why they do it. Okay.
In Israel, they use they take flatbed trucks, they take out the bottom metal and they put it in.
Right. So that's part of this hashkacha of these kind of places that I went to, is that they're keeping track of all those things to make sure you don't ever lose the years. Correct. That's correct. Okay. So we're going to come to that. Okay. So there's a couple of reasons why we could say this. Okay. Why we could say is the year growing in the Atzis she'ein nakuv is going to count for us. And the first is like this. The most simple reason is like this. There's a machlokes rishonim whether the din of Atzis she'ein nakuv applies to Arlah altogether. Okay. The Rosh says that it's the same as everything else. Atzis she'ein nakuv is not considered attached to the ground. That's what the Rosh says. The Rambam says no. Atzis she'ein nakuv makes no difference for Arlah. Okay, I don't know what the reason is. He says it makes no difference for Arlah. It's a difference for Shabbos, all kinds of other din for other mitzvahs tchuyos baritz, but not for Arlah. Okay, so the Rambam said that's the Rambam paskas. Okay, that there's no the din of Atzis she'ein nakuv makes no difference. It's midoraisi mechuyev for Atzis she'ein nakuv. Okay, so I don't know what the halacha is. But I don't care what the halacha is. Okay, I have a Safek. I have a machlokes. The machlokes is showing them now whether Atzis Shein nakuv is considered midoraisa, considered attached to the ground or not. I'm good. Okay, Safek Arlah and chutz is mutter. Okay, that's good enough for me. Okay, that's one reason. Okay, second is what?
See the halacha is the size of the holes. I'll tell you, the machlokes is about the size of the holes.
That's true. So I'm not sure how many opinions we're going to find to find that the holes are this small. But you're right. If we find, we could say people hold really small holes. It's even considered nakuv. Well, I'm not sure that's going to solve our problem. I'm not sure that's going to solve our problem. We'll come to that in a second.
I guess now Safek Rabusa being a Safek now. No,
what?
Safek Rabusa being a Safek now. Safek machlekes.
Yeah.
It depends what type of machlekes.
So we would say is, I told you before, the Chazon Ish says that it's only things that Chagos in the Gemara. That's not what everybody assumes. We assume that every machlekes is good enough. Every machlekes is good enough to say Safek Arlah is kol neko.
Even though it could be Safek B'Shem is not Safek B'Chal. You have the same problem with Efshel it's not Safek.
Right. That for this content for Arlah we're good. For Arlah,
Safek V'Rosh also be Safek then.
For Safek,
if we're saying a Safek she Efshel V'Rei is not a Safek.
Right.
So what is Safek?
No, I say Safek Chasron Chachma, where it's just a matter of my missing a piece of knowledge. That is considered that's not considered a Safek.
Right. See,
but
the Tereshlam says that Safek in Achral Rishonim, Atzis Svara, boils down to a Safek Machzor idea.
So you're saying it's like it's totally there's a shach and taz about whether if a machlokes. Okay. I don't think that most people go like that. I don't know what they do for that din in your day over there. But for Arlah, it all goes. I mean, everything goes for Arlah. Every Safek is good enough. You know what I mean?
Even Machzor idea should be Safek.
So that people say specifically not for Safek Chesar Nidin. It's not even a Safek. It's not even a Safek at all. Here's the machlokes. It's like kol make again, like the Ran says, it's kol make bars halacha k'mais and chutzar. It's somebody. It's a legitimate opinion. The Ram is a legitimate opinion that does make a difference if you're in a Atzis Shein nakuv. That's legit. So that's good enough. They can be made like that. Yeah. Okay. Our next thing, Chazon Ish says, he brings a Tosefta, and the Tosefta says, I realize that's what my son is. He said he wanted to know if the Marm comes usually. So there's a Tosefta to look at. Okay, if anybody's interested. Okay, so the Tosefta, and the Chazon Ish says this Tosefta, it's mashma from this Tosefta that even if you hold that Atzis Shein nakuv is only chayiv, it only has a din of Arlah midrabanan. He says, but for counting of years, any planting counts. Okay, in other words, it won't be chayiv unless it eventually ends up in Atzis nakuv, according to some Rishonim. He says, but the counting that happened before, and the words are the she'ein nakuv nami choshev hashrosha v'gidol. It grew. It's been growing for 3 years. It doesn't get chayiv midaraisa in Arlah until unless it actually makes it into an Atzis She'ein nakuv, an Atzis nakuv. He says, but there's a mashmois in the Tosefta that even as long as it's planted, that counts towards the 3 years. That means to say is that even if the Atzis She'ein nakuv does not count midaraisa, it's not chayiv in Arlah then, but the 3 years start counting then. It's a funny thing. It's not chayiv in Arlah. If you let it keep growing forever, it would not be chayiv in Arlah midaraisa, but the 3 years start counting over there. So then we eventually put it into the ground. The clock's been running for a year already, even though the first year that it was running, it wasn't chayiv in Arlah. But when it gets into the ground, but when it eventually makes it to the time where the clock's already been running for a year. Okay, that's the Chazon Ish says a Safek. He says, I think that's the Tosefta's mash like that. He says, but but there's another way to read the Tosefta. Maybe it doesn't work like that. He says, I'm not sure. His leaning at the beginning is definitely that it's lakula, but it's not true. Okay, so that brings me to a different question. Okay, what do we do now? We don't have a machlokes here about this. Okay, we just have Chazon Ish sitting in his study saying, I wonder if this is mutter, if this is asur. Okay, I have the Tosefta. Maybe it's mash like this. Maybe it's not mash like that. What is that? Is that a Safek Arlah? Chazon Ish is Mesuvik. I'm not sure. Maybe it's mutter. Maybe it's asur. Safek Chesar Chachma. Why is it Safek Chesar Chachma?
Tereshlam says whenever you came correct al Svara, you're not sure what the shada is.
Okay, so
it's not something.
Okay. What's the difference between machlokes between two people and?
Because you're 100% positive. You hear both svaras.
So he does. No. That I don't buy that. But you said it now. You said the wrong answer.
If you have two Rishonim, that.
What happens if he went to let him in shul and he said to him, and he said I think it's mutter, and the person sitting next to him said to the disciple said nah I think it's asur. Okay, so now you'd be happy now.
That'd be Safek Shak.
That's Safek Shak. But if he just says I'm not sure. Okay. Well, okay. So I wasn't sure about this myself. I wasn't sure what to say about this. But then Tzitz Eliezer brings from a Rashba. Okay, and the Rashba says like this. There's a Mishnah in Arlah that says that if you take a tree out of the ground, so I told you, if there's no dirt left on it, you have to start the years again. Start counting the 3 years again. Okay, but if there's enough dirt on it, that it's yochal lachayos, it's enough that it can live, then it counts. So Rashi says, okay, well, what do you mean it could live? How long does it have to be able to live for? How much dirt do you have to have? It has to have enough dirt that it could live. The Mishnah doesn't tell you how long it has to be able to live for. So how much dirt does it have to have? So the Rashi says, Al davar zen is chabadati kama yamim. I've been like trying to figure this out. Zman sheyochal lachayos kamu. I don't know how long does it have to be able to live for to be mutter. Yogati v'lemutas. I can't find any right. I have no idea. It doesn't say. The Mishnah says it, and I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. I'm banging my head against someone trying to figure out, and we have no idea what it is. So he says, well, he says, I think I have a reason to think that it should be mutter, even if it can live even the shortest amount of time. Okay, he says, even a tiny amount of time, any little bit. Not the beer root, it can't live at all because there's no dirt. But as long as any bit, that's good enough. Okay, and that's his like maskana. As long as it live any bit, that's good enough. And then he says. But you should know there's a Tosefta. It's the same Tosefta Chazanish. Okay, he says there's a Tosefta, just a coincidence. There's a Tosefta that's mashma that. No, I'm sorry. I before I get to this, he says so. Therefore, he says as long as it can live at all, that's good enough. That's good enough in chutz la'aretz. And then he says, but there's a question because there's a Tosefta that says that's mashma that it has to live for longer amount of time, and that's the end of the tshuva. So he says this is a really strange tshuva. He says he tells you what he thinks the din is. Any little bit of living is giving enough, and then he has to kasher himself. He has to, but the Sefta might be much more like that. And then the tshuva ends. Like, what happened? Like, where's the end of the tshuva? Like, it's stylistically, it doesn't sound right. Like, what weird kind of tshuva? He says what you think, and then he has to kasher himself, and then that's it. What happened? It was time for lunch. He went home. Like, that was the end of the tshuva. Like, what kind of strange thing? What happened? So he says, I'll tell you what happened. He says he was mesupik what trade it was. He wasn't sure. His netiya was that it should be mutter. So he says, but he knows that there's this right from the Tosefta. So the Tosefta is not a kash on what he's saying. The Tosefta is justification for why he said it's mutter in chutz la'aretz. Because I'm not sure what to do is. I have a Tosefta that might be mashma not like me. So in chutz la'aretz you could be mekel. So he was explaining afterwards, why do I only say in chutz la'aretz? Because it's Tosefta that might be mashma not like me. So in chutz la'aretz I could be mekel. I mean, I have no right one way or the other. There's a possibility like this, possibility like that. I'm a mesupik ready to go. So when you're mesupik ready to go, that's good enough. Safek Arlah is mutter. I'm mesupik. The Rashi was mesupik. So the Rashi was, he held himself. He says, I'm mesupik about it. That's a good enough Safek. So you let me make chutz la'aretz. Okay. So that would be a reason to be mekel. So when you said, if I can't be machriya, you think that it should be a Safek Chasar, you think I shouldn't be able to be mekel. And the Rashi says, no. He says, I wasn't sure how to be machriya. I wasn't sure how to be machriya. I even had to write a little bit the other way. But okay, chutz la'aretz is good enough. I could be mekel like that also. Okay. So that's another reason for us to make over here. Okay, and then the last reason to make about this part of the shilas is that so when he asked beforehand which materials are considered are materials that block blias from coming through. Okay, so metal is really clear. Metal blocks. The achronim, the contemporary achronim talk about what about plastic? Okay, there's a whole to-do whether plastic does that. The buckets there were plastic. What to do whether plastic, many assume that plastic blocks blias. I'm sorry, blias. Blocks Yanika, which we would have said on our own. We just meant, come on, nothing could get through the plastic. That's why they use plastic. Like, it's like, nothing gets through it. Others said not like that. Others said, no, Kenzain it is. Again, they're saying, the people who think about it having Yanika are thinking about it l'chumra, to be considered nakuv. Okay, for us it's a kula. Remember, things are backwards. Okay, for them it's a chumrah. If it's Yanika, most of them talk like for Shemitah, it's considered Yanika, then it's attached to the ground, then we have mitzvah tluis b'aretz, that's a chumrah. For us, it's a kula to say that way. And then, the other thing is that when you think about the bucket, it's just a bucket. Okay? And the place that I went to that has hashgacha for the Arlah, the buckets, with their holes in them, are over the ground. Okay? But in a regular nursery, they're not going to be over the ground. Why would they put it over the ground? It would be over cement. Okay? It's on a cement floor. Okay? The cement floor also has a machlekes, whether cheres is considered nakuv, whether Yanika goes through cheres or doesn't go through cheres. Okay? It's also machlekes.
How full are they?
What do you say?
How full are they?
How full are the buckets?
They're not.
Full? Why are you asking the question?
Because if it's over.
I'm coming to that in a second. But the underneath, let's say even this was nakuv, but it's sitting. Let's say plastic doesn't block Yanika, but the floor underneath it is a cement floor. Okay, that's also machlekes. So again, it's a machlekes that the people who talk about it, again, they talk about Eretz Yisrael, they're being machmir, saying it's a shayla, and some are being machmir about these things. We could be more mekel. We're in chutz la'aretz, so we could say, so maybe the pot that it's growing in is considered has Yanika through, and the floor below also has Yanika go straight through. No problem. It's as if it's on the ground. Okay, nothing's stopping it. Okay, then there's other parts of the shiloh that were mentioned. Some of them were mentioned beforehand, and one is what you just said, which is what about the leaves that hang over? Okay, when the plant comes there, the leaves hang over. Okay, that's also shiloh about whether leaves that hang over are considered to be force the rest of the plant to be considered to be attached to the ground. Okay, if we had tomatoes growing here, would that make the whole plant be considered to be attached to the ground? That's a to-do, whether that is a machlokes about that. When I first thought about that, I said, oh, so that's good news because the plants hang over. They do. The tree is, let's say the pot was this. It's really this wide, but let's say it's the pot is this big, and the vine is going till here, but there are leaves that are sticking out over the sides. Okay, there are, but what do you say? So the first is that what's it hanging over is hanging over the cement. That's true.
It takes time for the leaves to come.
And also, right, it takes time. By the time they come, it might have been already into the next year. Okay, they planted it in 2025. Maybe it didn't get there until 2026, after Rosh Hashanah or after Tu B'Av. Okay.
So sheer how high over the ground?
No. Atzis nakuv even off the ground. Even off the ground makes a difference. Even it doesn't have to be on the ground. As long as it's nothing stopping it between it, nothing being mafsed between it and the ground. But then there's another thing, which is, guess what? They don't plant one plant in the nursery. What it is that it looks like it's like much like a table like this, okay? And they've got 500 plants growing on here, okay? And they're all growing. This is the nursery. In this room is growing those 500 plants. So some of them might hang over the floor. But most of them that hang over the plant next to them. So if the plastic is blocking the Unica from coming through, most of them are not over the floor. Most of them are over the next plant. Okay, think about the 500 plants sitting here in this thing. So the ones on the edges maybe would be hanging over. Okay, but the ones in the middle are not. All the other ones, most of them are not hanging over anything.
And even if there's a little bit of space because they're circles, so you're gonna have a little space.
They're squares actually because it's not efficient to have circles. In Home Depot, they're circles because they look nice for your house. But in the nursery, they're
also. I remember circles.
I don't remember.
They were balls.
I don't remember. But I don't remember. So I have to look back at my pictures whether it was round or square. But in the nursery, we used to watching it was square, which makes sense. If you want to have a nursery, why would you make them round? There's all the empty space in between them. So it made sense to make them square. For sure, the place where we were at just a few months ago was square.
Even if there's a drop, that's good enough.
No, but there's no drop because the one that's here and then another one here and here and here. These are over each other.
Instead of the ones on the side.
Right. So some. Oh, you mean so make a Safek?
Make a Safek.
Oh, got it. I didn't think of that. Okay, so you mean as long as we get one, we're good. Okay, I didn't think of that. Yes, that's true.
Also, even for when the leaves started hanging over, that's also a Safek.
Could we make it so that might be a Safek. Sorry, we could just ask that. How long does it take till they grow leaves over?
They would know exactly when the leaf went over. They remember the day.
Okay, so I don't know the answer to the question, but I've been dealing with a different child. I'm not going to tell you what it is. A different child, and farmers like really into these things. That's what I noticed from this other thing that I'm dealing with. That they have every little detail. They know exactly like what's going on. Not that they remember, but they know if I plant it today, in 4 days this is going to happen. In 12 days this is going to happen. In 18 days they're like very into. But maybe it's a child. Okay, they have a Safek. But that's true. All this thing we just get one Safek, and then we're good. Okay.
I was just thinking now because of the concrete shiloh, in a store where they have the flatbeds that are removed and there's no metal, it's just the wood planks with space in between and the pots are sitting on them. But they only drive on ground. They don't drive on.
So I don't know how they deal with that. I don't. And this to do about that. All this stuff. Price could talk about over there. It's a whole ASIC. I just want to tell you something. Just a side to this thing is that when I once looked into the shiloh that how much in Eretz Yisrael you have to be Kosher for Safek Arlah. Okay, we're talking about chutzs where everything is mutter. In Eretz Yisrael, Safek Arlah is aser. Okay, how much of a Safek? And this is halacha l'maisa because halacha l'maisa for regular people. Because let's say you found that pomegranates. I told you there was a shiloh about pomegranates recently. Okay, whether they're Arlah or not, coming from Eretz Yisrael. So how are you going to answer that question? So the answer is in Eretz Yisrael they keep track and they have charts that tell you what percentage of pomegranates in Eretz Yisrael are Arlah. Okay, now I know what the percentage. Okay, what do I do now? Let's say I tell you 4% of them are Arlah. Is that good or bad for the Jews? What do I do now? Okay, 18%, 1.5%. What do I do now? I have a percentage. What do I do with that piece of information? Okay, so there's the different sheetas about what percentage you have to be machmir for. Okay, not for today. The different sheetas about that.
1% of the plant and 1% of produce.
Of produce. What percent of the pomegranates on the market are actually Arlah? Okay, so The question is, now pomegranates has an unusual title, but they give a number, okay? They say 4%, okay? What do I do with that piece of information? What do I do now? So there's different shitas, okay, not for today, different shitas about what percent you have to be makbid for in Eretz Yisrael, okay? Which is against halacha l'maisa. Someone says, I bought persimmons from Eretz Yisrael, are they motor usher? I look at the chart, and now what do I do with that piece of information? And now I know how many percent of persimmons are Arlah, okay? And is that motor usher? What do I do that? So it's a kind of fruit, it's a kind of fruit. So the
Looks like a tomato, like an orange.
right. It turns out whatever the dinim are, it turns out that the people in Eretz Yisrael were way more machmir than what the din required, and I was wondering about that. Why is that? Okay, so I found this. I know something to do with our today's topic, off the topic a little bit. So I found this person. Okay, but it turns out they were very much more machmir than the din really required you to be. But I saw it as it was like a long-term view. And that was like this. The din was lots of things were mutter. People the Rabbanon told people to be extra machmir and not eat things, even a tiny chashas of Arlah. Okay, that's why it says beli chash Arlah, because not even a little percentage of Arlah. And the result of that was that people started having hashkacha to make sure things were not Arlah. And I forgot the number. It was something like, in 1 year, if I remember correctly, it was like 900,000 plants were replanted under supervision to save early years that hadn't been done before. So in other words, everybody be more makbid to not eat stuff even with a Safek, even the smallest Safek, which minadim would have been mutter, in the end got the farmers to be more careful and therefore avoid loads and loads of Arlah, and just by saving years, just by planting correctly. Anyway, okay, back to our topic. Okay, so I'm almost finished. Okay, so we had lots of reasons to think that should be Arlah, but then we banged into another problem. Okay. and that. So Arlah, we seem to be pretty clear that by the time it comes 2026, stuff is going to be Safek Arlah. It's going to be and it'll be mutter because the year before when it was in the nursery is going to count. Okay, well we have enough reason to think that the year in the nursery is going to count. The only thing is we've got something else, and that is Neta revai. Things only mutter for 3. Only if
It's a guy.
So I'm going to come to that. So Neta revai. So what goes on, that the 4th year is also usher. Okay, so the 4th year, 2026, can't be more than the 4th year. Okay, so we're banging into the same kind of shilos for Neta revai. So it's midrais. So the first thing was, the Mechaber says that Neta revai applies even in chutz. The Ramah says no, it doesn't apply in chutz except for a karam. Okay, karam doesn't even mean grapes. It means karam means a specific type of vineyard. Okay, and the person did talk about it like the way the Mishnah talks about it. It's called Stein Keneged Stein V'achas Yotzei Zanav. Okay, but our vineyards are not exactly set up like that, but they're for sure qualified. Okay, they have hundreds of plants in a row. Okay, for sure qualified. So being in chutz is not going to save us. Okay, the Ramah says even the Ramah who's the more mekel. Okay, there are people who even more mekel, but the Ramah who's the mekel says that in a karam yichayev in it, so that's not going to help us. But there is a machlokes about what about if it belongs to a guy. Okay, the machlokes about it. So if you just learn Mishnayos, it's a Mishnah. Ein lo'ev k'chavim karam revai. Okay, that's what Rabbi Yehuda says. And the Chacham says no, there is a revai. Okay, so if you learn just Mishnayos, if you just looked at the Mishnayos and you didn't look at anybody on the side of the page, you would say it's a machlokes in the Mishnah, and the halacha is like the Chachamim that there is Neta revai even for a guy. And some people hold like that. That's what the Mishnah means. But others learn. If you look at the Rambam says the Mishnah doesn't mean is there a chiyuv of Neta revai. The Mishnah means is if a guy wants to designate his fruit as Neta revai, it's his 4th year. He wants to say, I want this to have a kedusha of Neta revai. He's allowed to be makdish. He say that. Okay, and the machlokes, whatever the machlokes about that is is the guy allowed to give his stuff, give it the kedusha of Neta revai? But everybody holds that doesn't have Neta revai by itself. Chazon passes like that, and others also. Sham also passes like that. Everyone agrees, everyone agrees that there's no Neta revai, there's no karam revai even if it belongs to a guy. Okay, and that brought us to our last knech over here, which was the person who owns this vineyard is not Jewish, but his wife is Jewish. Okay, so it turns out that in the state that he was in, he was right over the border in Oregon. Okay, Oregon. He was in Oregon, right over the border from California. So, which was good for the Jews because in California, it's called a community property. Okay, different laws, states have different laws about who owns property that a couple buys. So California is a community property state, which means if the husband bought it, it half belongs to his wife also. Okay, it's automatic that if he buys something, even though it's only in his name, it belongs to his wife also. So in which case it would have been owned by a Jewish person, and we would have Neta revai. That's not the end of the world. We could have just been poited, but we would have Neta revai. In Oregon, it's called a equitable distribution state. So in Oregon, what happens is that if one spouse buys something, they own it. If they divorce, then the court will divide their property equitably, and it might be they'll give her half the vineyard, but they might give her the car, they might give her something else. The lav dafka will they give that? It doesn't belong. If it's in his name, it belongs to him. And if afterwards they choose, if they were to divorce, would he give her something? Maybe yes, maybe not, but it doesn't belong to her automatically. Okay, so how do we know that? And his wife, he says, yeah, my wife is Jewish, and her mother was Jewish, and her mother's mother was Jewish. And he knew, and so there's just the funny part was that how do we know that he was telling us the truth, that it was his, that his wife doesn't have any ownership to it? So we didn't know what to say. We laughed when he said this. He was explaining to us. He told us his wife was Jewish. He was telling us as a kula. He said, I bought your sefer. This is the guy said. He said, I bought your sefer on alcoholic beverages because I wanted to learn about hashgacha, and I read up all about it, and I saw that there are certain things that only a yid can have, not a guy, depending on how you can make kosher wine, only for a yid, not for a guy. So would it help if I would transfer part of my ownership to my wife, because then it'll be partially owned by a yid, and then we can have these coolers about a yid, this is for yain nesach, for the yain nesach parts of it, because this shayla is about simanim, and shayla is about what's called making a stam, whether it's stam yain, so I can have coolers if I would give some to my wife. So that's how we knew that he was telling us the truth, that his wife doesn't really own anything. It's bad, so I own it, but I can give it to my wife. He had a whole shtickle Torah to tell us about why he should give it to his wife. Well, we had thought about the shayla beforehand, that whether there has to be Jewish ownership, so whatever. But he's like, so that's why we believe him, that he Taka owned, it was really all in his name. And Baruch Hashem, he's in Oregon, he was right over the border. I mean, right over. Had he been a few miles over, then we would have had a problem. Again, Neta revai is not the end of the world. It could be paid, a lot of paid even on a sharpruta nowadays. We could have been paid it. It would have been like Arlah would have been mamash off the creek. But okay, so that was the end of our ASIC. So in the end, everything's good. I don't know if it's going to end up having hashgacha on it, but if it does, then you'll know what happened to it. Yeah, we'll know what happened to it. But we decided in the end, it's going to be mutter. We're not going to worry about the Arlah and the Neta revai. We're safe. That's it.